after divorce. By the time the divorce was finalized, I realized that everything was truly over between Carol and me. In the first months after this, the children sometimes came to see me. They never stayed long because there wasn't much to talk about. All their conversations were usually conducted with their mother, and I just listened. Sometimes I ordered pizza if they came with their grandchildren. They loved the hot tub. I lived alone. Most often he dined out and sometimes met with friends for dinner. I was going to live the rest of my life the way I wanted. Sex was going to be an important part of my life again. I have found that I really enjoy relaxing in the hot tub every evening. And with guests, it was even more pleasant. Before I move on to my new lifestyle, I'll tell you a little about my family. I saw the children once a week. I kept a calendar on the refrigerator and always attended my grandchildren's school events. But I didn't sit down with my family because Carol was always there. I preferred to sit with friends. I only stopped by briefly on birthdays and holidays, but always found a reason to leave quickly. I knew that when Carol and I were in the same room, everyone felt tension, and I didn't want that. I still cared about her. After all, we had been married for 42 years. Feelings for her couldn't just disappear. I joined the travel club at AAA and spoke with their travel agency. They constantly organized trips, almost every 2 weeks. I started with day tours. I asked if it was possible to travel alone, and they answered that this was not a problem. Everyone was very friendly, and I met a lot of new people. I'll tell you a little about my trips and tours. They became real highlights of my life. The first trip was to the Football Hall of Fame. A lot of time has passed since I was last there. Then I started attending theater productions and music concerts. I really enjoyed life and made a lot of new friends. I often thought how wonderful it would be if Carol could share my interests. I met several women and we became friends. When they found out that I was divorced, some of them became even closer. For most trips, I caught the bus in the next town, 40 miles from home. I didn't want to go with the local AA chapter, so I wouldn't meet anyone I knew. I'm tired of explaining that Carol and I are no longer together. I became close to several women during my travels. I had their phone numbers and addresses, and they invited me to visit. Marge became my first woman after the divorce. She was in her early 50s and also divorced. She was traveling with a group of friends. When we talked, I told her that I was recently divorced and wasn't looking for a relationship. I just wanted to travel a little and enjoy life. She replied that she didn't want a relationship either, but she likes male attention from time to time. She had no intention of getting married again. I liked her. Marge was an attractive woman who knew how to look good in short dresses and skirts. All her friends also looked nice and were friendly. They were easy to talk to and a nice change from the constant arguing I was used to. On one overnight flight to Atlantic City that lasted one day, we spent time together. On the way back, we sat next to each other and the lights on the bus were dimmed. Most of the passengers were asleep. She covered our legs with a blanket, and I couldn't resist putting my hand on her knee. She removed the armrest between us and leaned against me. My hand slowly but surely slid higher up her thigh. She looked at me and spread her legs slightly. She moved closer and began to stroke my arm, then put her hand on my knee. There was an ease and confidence in her movements that both fascinated and excited me. "We can't do this on the bus," I whispered to her with slight embarrassment. "We won't," she answered with a smile. "For now, it's just a game. If you want to continue, come to my house when my friends take me." I felt like a teenager breaking rules on a school bus, and the feeling was both nerve-wracking and exciting. We continued our little adventure, but that was it before we got back to town. Later, as planned, I arrived at her house. We spent almost the whole night together, enjoying every moment. Marge was an amazing conversationalist, and her energy was infectious. Our meetings continued, and she often emphasized that I was always a welcome guest in her home. This is how our warm, trusting relationship began, as if we were friends with benefits. It was a special time, filled with mutual understanding and care. I met a few more women on other tours. I have to admit, I enjoyed it immensely. I started to think about participating in overnight trips, but most of them included double occupancy. I spoke to our tour director, Sue, and she promised to look for a suitable option. I immediately explained that I didn't want to live in a room with other men, and she just laughed. The next trip was to Branson, Missouri, and included an overnight stay. Sue contacted me and asked if I would mind sharing a room with Marge and one of her friends. They were ready to share the room if I behaved correctly. Of course, I agreed. I still remember the smiles on Marge and Ellen's faces as I boarded the bus. Branson was great, and I would love to go there again. But the night with Marge and Ellen was even more memorable to me. When we entered the room, I was a little nervous. The room had 2 queen-size beds. I suspected sex was inevitable given my past encounters with Marge. Ellen excused herself and went to the bathroom to change into her night clothes. She came out in a seductive peignoir. While Ellen was in the bathroom, Marge came up to me and asked if I would mind a threesome. Of course, I replied that I didn't mind, although I had no such experience before. She poured me a glass of water and handed me a small blue pill. "I think you might need it," she said with a smile. I had never taken these pills before and didn't know what to expect. Ellen left the bathroom, and Marge, meanwhile, took off her clothes right in the room. Ellen laughed when she saw my surprise. She came up to me and kissed me while Marge put on her nightgown. These shirts were completely useless because within 15 minutes all 3 of us were completely naked and ended up on the same bed. Marge told Ellen early on that I was good at giving pleasure, so I decided to start there. Lying on my back, I allowed Ellen to position herself comfortably and began to give her pleasure. She was delighted and her reaction showed that she really enjoyed it. Ellen, it turned out, was married, and her words made it clear that she had not received this kind of attention for a long time. I tried to do everything to make this moment special for her. We changed positions, and I continued to give her pleasure, to which she responded with gratitude and joy. When Ellen finished, Marge smiled and said it was her turn. I was completely ready and happily continued. We enjoyed the moment, and the atmosphere was filled with passion and intimacy. Marge and I moved at our own pace, and eventually she reached the pinnacle of pleasure. Ellen, inspired by the moment, decided to join again, and we continued. The whole evening was filled with joy and tenderness, and each of us enjoyed the moment in our own way. When it was all over, Ellen went to take a shower, happy with what had happened, and Marge and I were left alone. We hugged and enjoyed a moment of intimacy that didn't require words. The evening ended on a pleasant note, and we both felt completely satisfied and warm. I was lying on my back, and she was on top of me. I liked it when my partner was in this position because I could see her move. This time I was able to hold out longer. Ellen came out of the shower and, watching us, said, "Damn you too. I just took a shower, and now I'm horny again." We all laughed, and I invited her to join. Marge didn't mind. She continued to enjoy the moment. Ellen joined, and I tried to give her attention. At the same time, one woman was actively enjoying our intimacy, and the other was enjoying my participation. I heard Marge scream as she reached her climax, and I was close to it too. She remained motionless for several minutes, simply enjoying the moment. I continued to be with Ellen until I felt that she too had reached her peak. After a while, both women pulled away and I headed to the shower. A few minutes later, Marge joined me to help me wash my back. We laughed, and she felt relaxed and content, and then we finished the shower together. When we returned to the room, Ellen was already in bed. She seemed to be sleeping. Marge joined her, and I had the bed to myself. After that evening, I slept like a baby. The next day, on the bus ride home, Sue asked how I liked the accommodation. I replied that it could not have been better. No one on the bus even knew what was happening. Later, I went on a couple more overnight trips with Ellen and Marge. We never discussed Ellen's marriage, and I thought it was best that way. If her husband didn't know how to please her, then he had no idea what he was missing out on. That's probably why she sought solace elsewhere. On the home front, I've got a few partners nearby that I'd like to talk about. One morning, while walking, I met one of our friends from church. I knew Cindy for many years. Her children were a couple of years younger than mine and grew up together as good friends. She had a son who lived in our city and a daughter who moved to Florida. She divorced her first husband many years ago. He was an alcoholic and a heavy drinker at that. His parents were business owners and fairly wealthy people. Cindy was one of the most popular girls in her school, very beautiful and captain of the cheerleading team. No wonder they got married. A few years after the divorce, she met Tom. Not with my friend Tom, but with another Tom who taught at the same elementary school where she worked. They dated and eventually got married. However, Tom got cancer and died 3 years ago. He was a really good person. After this, Cindy began dating an older man, but it was not true love. He lived in another city and came once a month. I saw him in church, although I haven't been there myself for about 9 months. Cindy has always been a flirt. She and my wife were good friends. I always liked Cindy, and when I met her, I always hugged her. When she saw me on the street, she came up and hugged me. "I missed you." "How are you?" she asked. "Everything is fine. I'm minding my own business." "And you?" I answered. "Everything is the same, nothing new. I see Carol in church. She seems happy, but she never talks about you. All the talk is only about grandchildren. So what do you do now that you are a free man?" she asked with a smile. "I travel a little and enjoy the jacuzzi almost every night. You can join if you want," I smiled back. "Maybe I'll take this offer. My neck and back have been tense lately." I wasn't sure if she was joking or not, but I said that I usually take a bath after dark so that nosy neighbors won't peek. I installed blinds so no one could see into my patio where the hot tub is. Well, I need to continue my walk. If you're wondering about the jacuzzi, I'll be there around 9 tonight. I hugged her goodbye and continued on my way. Cindy lived just a block away from me. I often saw her walking or cycling past. She dyed her hair red, and I found it very attractive. Her daughter Mary was a beautiful woman and at one time became prom queen. I assumed Cindy looked the same when she was younger. I was about to get into the hot tub when I heard a knock on the patio door. It was Cindy. "I came in through the back door so your nosy neighbors wouldn't see me. Is the jacuzzi offer still open?" Of course, I was just about to climb. Cindy took off her tracksuit, revealing a two-piece swimsuit underneath. She looked great. I climbed in first and then gave her my hand to help her in. I offered her a place with the most powerful jets and turned on the bubbles. My water temperature always stays at 37 degrees. I sometimes lower it for my grandchildren. Oh damn, this is simply incredible. I could stay here forever. "You can come whenever you want. Just call ahead. Sometimes I have guests, and some evenings I am not at home." "Sounds fair. I'll definitely be back." "Carol doesn't come see you." "No, we don't really communicate. If we cross paths, we behave politely, but I try to stay away." "What about you and Don?" "I see him about once a month. That's all." "Damn, I love a jacuzzi. It's so nice. Now I understand why you are here every evening." I smiled, looking at her. "What? You're thinking about something." "About what? Did I say or do something?" she asked. This is something I remembered 20 years ago. It just made me smile. "Is this related to me? Did I do something stupid?" she asked. "Cindy, I've always liked you, you know that." Looking at you, I remembered one incident when my family and I went to the pool. You were wearing a red swimsuit then, and I hope you won't be offended. Oh, damn, I remember this swimsuit. It was too small for me, but the kids wanted to go to the pool, so I grabbed it. And what did you see then? Well, how should I put it? You, peeked out of your swimsuit. Very strongly. Oh, God, I never knew about it. No one said anything. Why didn't you tell me anything? She was already laughing. What could I say? Carol was there. Should I have said that? It would definitely be a delight. I was already laughing. Don't tell me it's like that again. She stood up and looked at the bottom of her swimsuit. No, but I like the way it fits you. She sat down again. We started talking about more frank things. I remembered how a few years ago she came to me and I massaged her shoulders. She really liked it. I was generally considered a master of shoulder massage. Even Carol told her friends how good I was at this, but it seemed so long ago. I reminded Cindy of this, and she asked if I could massage her shoulders now. Of course, I immediately agreed. I sat down in one of the corners of the jacuzzi, stretched out my legs, and Cindy sat on them in front of me. I started massaging her shoulders, and she moaned how good it felt. Gradually, I pulled the straps of her swimsuit off her shoulders, and she didn't say anything. Soon I unbuttoned the top of her swimsuit, and she leaned back relaxed against my chest. I hugged her, feeling her warmth. Her trust and closeness filled me with the excitement I had long dreamed of. At this moment, our touches were gentle and mutual, as if everything happened by itself, without words. After asking her to stand up, I removed the rest of her swimsuit and helped her sit on the edge of the jacuzzi. We enjoyed these moments of intimacy, and I felt how she responded to my every touch. Her smile and words made it clear that she liked what was happening. "Oh, I need to go to the toilet," she said, a little embarrassed. I pulled away and smiled at her reassuringly, showing her that it wasn't a problem at all. When it was over, she sat back in the bath, her face filled with surprise and joy. "I can't believe what just happened. I've never experienced anything like this, and I'm 58 years old," she said. "I can't understand how Carol could leave you. I would keep you close at least for moments like this." She smiled at me, and I smiled back. Cindy promised never to tell Carol about what happened between us. She just asked to be friends with benefits. I didn't mind. She called me about once every 2 weeks, and we would meet, most often in the hot tub. She said it was weird for her to sit behind my wife every week at church. She said that she often thought to herself about Carol. "You stupid, stupid woman. How could you refuse sex with a man like Bob? I guess I should say thank you for the best sex of my life." One day, Barbara came to my house. I didn't know her very well, but she was married to Don, one of the guys who always brought vegetables to my wife. I was sitting on the porch and invited her to join. "What's up, Barb? Long time no see." "Everything is fine. Sorry to hear about the divorce. You seemed like a good couple." "Bob, did Don have anything to do with your divorce?" She was serious. "No, not at all. Why are you asking?" "Don constantly distributes vegetables from the garden to various women we know. I found out that he slept with one of our neighbors. I know he has a crush on Carol, like most men, but I don't think she's the type to cheat." "Barb, as far as I know, Don didn't sleep with Carol, and I'm sure there was nothing between them. To be honest, this is one of the reasons for our divorce. Carol didn't want sex anymore. Please don't tell anyone about this. It's not the only reason, but it's a big part of why we're not together anymore." Barb was an attractive woman. I think she was about 56. She was in good physical shape and walked a lot every day. I invited her to come in for a drink, and she agreed. She was wearing white shorts and a t-shirt with a sports bra underneath. She was sitting on the sofa, and I was on the chair next to her. I asked if she was going to divorce Don, and she said she had decided to get back at him instead. After she found out about Don and the neighbor, she told him that she would get revenge one day. He won't know to whom or when it will happen, but it will happen. She also said that if she caught him cheating again, she would leave him with nothing. It's been 5 months since she talked to Don about his infidelities. She forced him to confess and found out that he was with 2 other women to whom he gave vegetables. One of them was married and the other was single. Then she asked about Carol, and he replied that he had never touched her. I asked her if she had already taken revenge, and she said no, but it would definitely happen. "Bob, do you like me?" "Yes, even more than just like you. You are a very beautiful woman with an attractive appearance." "Bob, you know why I'm here? Do you want to have sex with me or not? It'll only be one time, and it'll stay between us." She wouldn't tell anyone, but she wanted to feel the satisfaction of getting back at him. I was surprised by her directness. "Barb, I'll have sex with you, but it won't be just a mechanical act. I can't do this anymore. Even if we're not in love, I'll give it my all. It's just the way I'm wired. If I have sex, I want it. Make it amazing. She was surprised. I think she thought she would just take off her shorts, I would have sex with her, and it would quickly be over and her revenge would be fulfilled. Okay, but you have to understand that this will only be one time, and you have to promise to keep it a secret. I don't want Dawn to find out who it was with. Will you promise? I promise. I took her hand and led her to the bedroom. She started to take off her clothes, but I stopped her. I'll do it if you don't mind. I pulled her t-shirt up and took it off. Then he unbuttoned her shorts and slid them down her beautiful legs. The first thing I thought was how could Dawn cheat on such a woman? And then I remembered how stupid I was when I was young. She stood in front of me and I knelt down, gently kissing her stomach. She didn't expect this and sighed quietly. Her hands lay on the back of my head and I continued my gentle touches, gradually lowering myself below my navel. I liked to give her tenderness, feeling her closeness. When I reached the hem of her robe, I carefully slid it down her thighs. She allowed herself to step out of them, and I sat her on the edge of the bed, kneeling in front of her. I carefully lifted her legs, and she lay down on the bed. I felt her body respond to my caresses and continued to give her tenderness. Bob, I can't believe you're doing this. Don never gave me that much attention. He always wanted to take care of himself, but he didn't reciprocate, she said quietly. I'm not Don. I like to give you attention, I replied. You deserve it. Her body reacted to my touches, and I saw that she was pleased. When she finally relaxed, I asked her to move to the center of the bed. As she crawled toward the center, she took off her sports bra. I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. We continued our time together, enjoying every moment. I kissed her, gave her affectionate touches, and was happy to see her pleasure. Every moment was important to me to make her feel special and wanted. Barb, now it's your turn, I said, smiling at her. She sat on top, and we continued our journey that evening. I enjoyed the moment, looked at her face, and every breath she took seemed something unique and real. We were together, and that was the most important thing. She headed to the bathroom, and I knocked on the door to hand her some clothes. When she came out, I was already dressed. I didn't even imagine that everything would be so wonderful. I thought it would just be quick sex, and my revenge would end there. Dawn is not at all like you. It was the best sex of my life. I haven't had anyone ever since I married Dawn, she said. Barb, thank you. I always thought Dawn was a very lucky man to have such a beautiful wife. Now I know how lucky he is. I understand that you did it for revenge, but if you ever want to do it again, I always here, I said in a joking tone, but we both knew that I was serious. And to be fair, she's come back twice in the last 2 months. I tried my best every time. Don drives down the street and I just nod at him. He has no idea that his wife and I are having sex. I'm starting to realize how much women like it. Most of them have never experienced this before, and I love being the one to give them this experience. After she left, I was left sitting in silence, thinking about how far this story had gone. Barb returned twice, and each time everything seemed new to her. For me, it was more than just a physical connection. Yes, there was no love between us, but there was something special in the way she opened up next to me. Remembering the last meeting, I caught myself thinking that I was beginning to enjoy it even more than I expected. She trusted me, came to me to feel something that she did not receive from Dawn. This, of course, does not excuse her or me, but I could not ignore the fact that in these moments she looked happy. But then it all distracted me a little from what I was really supposed to be doing. I decided to unwind and bought a ticket for a bus tour to attend an Elvis impersonator show. It seemed like a good idea to have a little fun and get away. When I arrived at the bus, I was told that I would be part of the second group. I made myself comfortable and started talking with a couple of men who, as it turned out, also often traveled through this agency. Everything was going great until I saw familiar faces. Carol and Dawn were getting on the first bus. My heart sank a little, but I did everything to remain unnoticed. Later, I asked the trip leader if she knew these women. Oh yes, they travel with us often. For the last 6 months, they have hardly missed a single trip. They even go on our multi-day tours. The words hit me. One of the reasons Carol and I divorced was her reluctance to travel. I asked her to go with me to different places, but she always refused. And now she travels, but not with me. I got back on the bus and tried not to think about it. However, later, during lunch, something happened that I wanted to avoid. I was sitting at the table with Jerry and his wife, June, when Carol and Dawn walked into the room. Jerry, who knew them, invited them to join. I knew I couldn't just up and leave, so I stayed. Carol and Dawn were clearly surprised to see me, but I pretended we didn't know each other. Jerry seemed to be trying to set us up by saying that I had come alone. After lunch, as soon as I went outside, Carol and Dawn came up to me. They clearly wanted to say something, but I stopped them. Carol, I'm glad you found someone you're comfortable traveling with. I'm glad you're enjoying life. But don't worry, I won't be traveling with this agency anymore. Good luck to both of you. I turned around and got on the bus, leaving them standing there. Last year was completely different for me. I dated several women, but I often thought about my first love, Carol. We failed to maintain our relationship. I was to blame for the beginning of our problems, but even after 42 years of marriage, I still don't understand what went wrong. She was probably tired of me, but I still had feelings for her. I think divorce was probably the best decision. I continued to see my children and grandchildren regularly. I found the communication I needed. I was told that Carol said that her life was much less stressful. I go to the doctor every year because of my high blood pressure and also because I am diabetic. The doctor wants to see me at least once a year. Carol and I used to go together, but I called and made an appointment for another day. I didn't want us to cross paths there. I asked the doctor if he had seen Carol, and he said yes, she was in great shape, seemed less stressed, and her blood pressure had improved. He said he was sorry we got divorced after all these years, but these things happen. He asked how I was, and I replied that I seemed to be doing well. I mentioned that my stomach is very bothered. I often feel constipated and use a lot of laxatives, and my stool is almost black. This didn't make him happy at all. He scheduled me for a colonoscopy and gastroscopy in 2 days. The doctor said that they would conduct a camera examination on me. One would be inserted into my throat, the other into my rectum, to check the condition of my intestines. I needed someone to take me home after my treatments, so I asked my friend Tom. I told him I didn't want anyone to know about it, especially Carol. I asked him not to tell even his wife, because I knew it would get back to Carol. He promised me to keep everything a secret. I had my checkups, and then Tom and I went for a light lunch. The only thing I could eat was soup. The doctor said that he took several polyps for analysis, and the results would be ready in a couple of days. 2 days later, I received a call from the doctor who asked me to come back the next day. He wanted to talk in person, not over the phone. I realized that the news would be bad. They report good news immediately. When I arrived, I asked the doctor not to hide anything from me. I wanted to know the whole truth. Bob, your body is affected by cancer. We tested 6 polyps, and they all turned out to be cancerous. We don't have many treatment options, and none of them are in your favor. I want to do an X-ray and an MRI to see if we find more. After the examination, the doctor said that everything turned out to be even worse than he expected. He suggested starting chemotherapy and radiotherapy to try to shrink the tumors. Later, many operations would still have to be performed. Doctor, 3 years ago my brother-in-law died of pancreatic cancer. He went to a specialized clinic and tried everything, but his chances were at most 25%. Is this the same as mine? Yes, Bob, that's true. But your intestines and colon are also affected. As a doctor, I feel we should try to remove as much as possible. No, doctor, I don't think it's necessary. I've lived a good life and am now mostly alone. I'm not going to put my family through this ordeal. How long do I have left? Perhaps 4 months, no more. I can prescribe painkillers that will help, but towards the end, you will have to go to hospital, probably for a couple of weeks. The pain will be too much to manage at home. What about my life up to this point, doctor? Will I be able to live as usual? You can continue to live as you lived until the pain becomes unbearable. But you need to find someone who can help when the time comes. I want to see you every month. With the painkillers I'm going to prescribe you, you won't be able to drive. And the more physical activity, the faster the cancer can spread. Try to take care of yourself. I thanked the doctor and said that I did not want my ex-wife to know about my condition. I signed an order not to disclose the information to anyone. I was counting on my friend to help me with this. I called Tom and we talked for several hours. I told him everything and explained that I would not undergo chemotherapy or go under the knife. I just need a friend to help me in the end. Tom cried and we hugged. I'll be there, friend. Whatever it takes. Tom, I will put my affairs in order, and I want you to be the executor of my will. I'll leave everything to Carol and the kids, but I want you to keep it all right. Sell the house, talk to Carol about everything else. I think the best thing to do is to hold an auction. I'll give my truck to my son, Kyle. I'll do whatever you ask, Bob. What a pity that there is no other way out. Hey, I'm not dead yet. The doctor said that I would be able to live a normal life until the last few weeks. Do you think Linda will let you go on vacation with me for a week? I want to visit a couple of relatives in other states, but I'm not going to tell them this is the last time. Yes, I don't care what Linda says. We are best friends, and I will go with you. Tom and I went on a week-long road trip visiting 2 different states. I visited my sister and some cousins. It's funny, but everyone was saying how good I looked. I actually lost a little weight. It pained me to realize that I would see them for the last time. Returning home, Tom came to me and told me that Carol had called him. She wanted to know why I went to Michigan and Kentucky. I told her that you decided to visit your relatives. What's wrong with this? She replied that when your father was dying, you took him to his family and asked if everything was okay with you. She tried to call your doctor, but the nurse said that since you were no longer married, she couldn't give any information. Tom, I don't want them to know anything. What will this give them? They will find out everything soon enough. I'll call her and figure something out. I called Carol and told her that she was no longer my wife by her own choice, and that I had the right to decide for myself what to do and where to go. I didn't mean to be rude, but it was best for her. She said she would leave me alone. All this happened before the holidays. I told her I would be at Kelly's Thanksgiving dinner. I arrived and tried to look as natural as possible. I looked good on the outside, but on the inside it was completely different. I interacted with children and even played with grandchildren. But I noticed that Carol often looked at me intently. After dinner, I told everyone that I had to leave, but that I would definitely see them on Christmas Day. I kissed the kids goodbye and drove home. I did everything to get my affairs in order. I redid the will and prepared everything necessary. I even went to the funeral home and paid for the funeral, coffin, and cemetery plot in advance. I know it sounds dark, but I wasn't scared. I was surprised when the funeral director said that many people plan their funerals in advance. After Thanksgiving, I had my second to last intimate experience that I want to talk about. The last one happened after Christmas, but I will take this story with me to the grave. On Saturday after the holiday, around 9 in the evening, I heard a knock on the door. I couldn't believe who came. Marie, Cindy's daughter, stood on the threshold. I heard she flew in from Florida to visit her mother and brother. She was a stunningly beautiful woman, a real model. She wore a form-fitting dress that showed off her figure, with a plunging neckline and a high slit at the hip. Marie, what in God's name are you doing here? How beautiful you are. Come on in. Hello, Mr. Beale. I hope I didn't interfere. No, come in. Where is your mom? Is she with you? No, she went out with her friend Dawn tonight. She won't be here until tomorrow morning. I was with friends from school, and now I'm back. My children stayed overnight with my brother. I know you're probably surprised that I'm here. It's about my mom. I thought she had come to ask me to stop seeing her mother. Before I could say that her mother is a grown woman and can live her own life, she continued. Mr. Beale, my mother and I often have heart-to-heart conversations, and she tells me things that she doesn't tell anyone else. She said she had sex with you, and it was the best experience of her life. You did something to her that no man has ever done. She said it was a whole other level. Marie, what happened between me and your mother concerns only us. No, you don't understand. I want to be made love to me the same way you made love to my mother. I want to feel that once-in-a-lifetime feeling that she told me about. Mr. Beale, I want to have sex with you. I don't want you to hold back. I want to feel the same as my mother. I wasn't sure what to say or do. Marie was married with 2 children and was about 30. Her body and appearance radiated sex. Bob, this will only happen once. I'm flying back to Florida tomorrow. Believe me, I've thought about this a lot. I promise not to tell anyone. It will be our secret. I even want my mom to know. I dated a lot of men during college and never felt the way my mom felt. I love my husband, I really do, and our sex life is good, but I've never overdone it. I want to feel the same way that my mother says you make her feel. Will you do this for me? Marie, I can make love to your body and do everything I know sexually, but I can't promise how it will be for you. Your hopes are very high. I just hope you won't be disappointed. I'm willing to take the risk. Mom never told me about any other men who made her feel the way you do. I could tell she was drinking and wondered if that helped influence her decision. I took her hand and we went to my bedroom. I promised her that I would do my best. She just had to agree to everything I asked. I let her know that I wouldn't do anything to harm her. She agreed to go with me. She went to unbutton her dress, and I told her I would do it for her. Anticipation was an important part of the moment. She turned around and I carefully unzipped her dress, helping her take it off. I hung the dress on the hanger while she waited, slightly worried. She was wearing only her underwear and tights. I slowly unclasped her bra and removed it from her shoulders. I tried to take my time and create an atmosphere of trust and intimacy. I then headed to the kitchen and returned with a small chilled drink to add an element of comfort to the moment. She was surprised, but smiled and accepted it. As she stood in front of me, I helped her remove her tights and the rest of her clothes. She looked beautiful and confident. I laid out an extra sheet on the bed and it rested on her stomach. While she was relaxing, I changed into comfortable clothes and took out some massage oil. I started massaging her shoulders, trying to relieve the tension. Her skin was soft and her muscles were slightly tense. I moved slowly down her back, paying attention to every detail to help her relax completely. Her calm breathing and atmosphere of trust made this moment especially important for both of us. I then helped her turn over and continued massaging her, starting from her shoulders and gradually moving lower, paying attention to her stomach and legs. I felt her relax and knew she was enjoying this moment. Everything happened calmly and harmoniously, creating a feeling of closeness and care that was important to both of us. She didn't speak, but made many different sounds. I could tell she was enjoying it. Around this time, I carefully lifted her legs and placed a pillow to make her more comfortable. I tried to please her and please her. We continued like this for a while until she looked very pleased. Then I stopped for a change of scenery. "Bob, please continue. It feels so good," she said, and I offered to join me in the hot bath. We walked in, and I turned on the jets to create some nice bubbles. She said it was very relaxing. After some time in the bath, I helped her sit on the ledge, and we continued to enjoy the moment of intimacy, but in a softer and gentler way. She was very pleased, and we were happy that we could be so close to each other. After that, I sat her on my lap, and we just enjoyed the warmth of the water and the moment with each other. She said she had never felt so relaxed and at peace. When we finished, I picked her up and carried her to bed, where she fell asleep almost immediately, tired but happy. I looked at her beautiful face, how she slept peacefully, and felt very happy. I covered her with a blanket and lay down next to her, protecting her sleep and enjoying this silence and closeness. The next morning, I woke up feeling Marie's caring touch. She was next to me and hugged me affectionately, touching my hand. With a slight smile, she said she was grateful for the wonderful time they had spent together the night before. I felt a gentle understanding and warmth arise between us. Marie looked at me with that sparkle in her eyes that spoke more than words. She said that she wanted to please me, and I felt our connection become even stronger. After this touching scene, I invited her to relax, and we continued our morning in a cozy atmosphere. Marie asked for some time to shower, and I gladly obliged, giving her space. I took this moment to get dressed and clean up. Marie looked beautiful when she came out of the bathroom. She put her dress back on and looked as charming as the day before. We exchanged reassuring smiles, and she hugged me, telling me that everything was even better than she expected. It was a moment full of sincere joy and gratitude. Before leaving, I gently touched her hand and told her with a smile that our meeting was something special for me. She smiled back and jokingly commented that I was a little naughty, but she seemed to enjoy it. Bob, like I said, it was a one-time thing. I really love my husband. I'm glad I don't live here because I don't know if I can stop myself from coming back. Marie, buy some movies and watch them with your husband. Get him used to it slowly. I'm sure when he sees how much you like it, he'll be there for you. I saw Cindy 2 days later, and she said she had something to tell me. She told me what she told Marie about me and her when she took her to the airport. She hoped I wasn't mad at her for telling her daughter about it. I told her that we are both single people and we can do whatever we want. It doesn't sound like Marie said anything to her mother, but Cindy said Marie smiled when she told her how I made her feel. She even said that Marie was going to try out some of these ideas with her husband. Cindy told me she was going to Florida for 3 weeks over the holidays and wouldn't be back until after New Year's. She told me she was going to miss me and wanted to know if I wanted a snack. I told her that my stomach was bothering me and I wasn't feeling very well. That was true, and that I would see a doctor about it. Cindy and I were never together again. I haven't been feeling very well lately and have been taking a lot of painkillers. I haven't had sex with anyone other than Marie, and then only once. For some reason, this sex really exhausted me. The doctor told me that I needed to take care of myself and avoid excessive physical activity. Tom came to see me every couple of days, and we talked about old times. I even told him about the book I was writing and asked him to finish it if I didn't have time myself. He replied that he was not a writer, but he would try to do his best. All he had to do was tell me what happened after my death. It shouldn't be too difficult. He admitted that it was difficult for him to keep it all to himself and asked if he could at least tell his wife Linda about it. She has already started asking questions why he comes to me so often and takes me on errands. I said he could tell Linda if she promised not to tell anyone, especially Carol. It was too early to tell anyone this. On Christmas Day, I went to my daughter Kim's house for dinner. Carol said, "I've lost a lot of weight." I replied that I was eating less and trying to lose a couple of pounds. "You always said I was too fat," I told her. She did not respond to this injection. I knew deep down that she suspected something. Dinner was good, and I allowed myself to overeat a little. I knew I would pay for it later, but I wanted to show my family that everything was okay. All my loved ones were there. I gave everyone a $200 gift card from their favorite store. I gave the older children a separate card. The youngest, who was not yet 5, added money to their parents' card, but bought each of them a soft toy so they would have something to open. I even took a gift card for Dawn, which surprised her. The card for Carol was for $500. She didn't know what to say. I told her that she and Dawn could buy new clothes for their trips. I shouldn't have added that sarcastic comment, but I couldn't resist. At Thanksgiving, I told everyone that I didn't want or need any gifts for Christmas. I was glad that my grandchildren drew pictures for me. The older two gave me their latest framed school photos. My daughters and son gave photographs of their families. This was the last Christmas I saw my whole family. During the holidays, everyone has so much to do. I stayed home, watched TV, and used the hot tub. It was so relaxing. Tom said he was going to Indiana for a couple of days to see his daughter from his first marriage. If I need anything, I can turn to Linda. She was the only one who knew about my condition, but I didn't talk to her. She still came to me while Tom was away. I laughed when she said I didn't look sick. I replied that the pills work wonders. She was a beautiful woman and reminded me of Carol. On New Year's Day, I called all the children and wished them a happy holiday. I knew my condition was getting worse. When I woke up, I felt my stomach burning. I continued to take medications, but they did not help. 2 days passed before I called Tom. I said the pain was unbearable and maybe it was time to go to the hospital. I called my doctor and he made an appointment at the hospital. Tom picked me up and we were there in a little over an hour and a half. It was University Hospital in Columbus where the doctor wanted to send me. I didn't want to go to the local hospital where everyone knew me. The doctor prescribed me strong doses of morphine. Now I understand why so many people take drugs. As soon as I felt the slightest pain, I simply pressed the button and it went away. Tom had power of attorney and would be the executor of my will when the time came. He had all the necessary documents. I couldn't be put on life support except for food. I didn't want to die of hunger. The next day I felt really bad. I told Tom it was time for him to take matters into his own hands. I thought I still had a couple of weeks, but the doctor said there was less time left. When you experience pain, it's even better. Tom says, "My name is Tom, and I promise to finish Bob's story. He has always been there for me, supporting me through my first divorce, being best man at my second wedding, and helping me through the problems and losses that happen in marriages and families. It was hard to sit next to him and watch him take his last breaths. I called Linda to tell her I was at the hospital with Bob. She said I needed to call Carol, but I said I made a promise to Bob and I was going to keep it. She hung up, and a few minutes later Carol called me. Linda probably managed to tell her. "What the hell is going on, Tom?" "Linda said you're at the hospital with Bob." "Carol, Bob is dying." "What? Why didn't you tell me anything?" I felt like something was wrong. "Carol, Bob asked me not to tell anyone. I just recently confessed to Linda, but she had to keep it a secret. He has pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis was made back in October. He didn't want anyone to know. But I'm his wife." "Exactly, you are his ex-wife." All those around him could do was pity him, and he was too strong a man to accept pity. He arranged everything so that no one would be burdened. "Let me talk to him," Carol said. "He's already on his deathbed, Carol. The hospital chaplain had just prayed with him. He can barely understand anything. He's all on drugs. Put the damn phone to his ear, do you hear? I want to talk to him, damn it." I did as she asked and put the phone to Bob's ear. "Bob, if you can hear me, forgive me. I love you, Bob, I always have. Rest assured, my love, you will forever remain in my heart." I heard her words. She was crying. A minute later, I took the phone and said, "Carol, Bob just took his last breath. Whatever you said to him, those were the last words he heard." Carol was crying. "Carol, tomorrow at noon, I will come to you and tell you about the plans that Bob left. I'm sorry, Carol, I loved him too." I hung up. I talked to the doctors and nurses about what they needed to sign and where they could take Bob's body. I collected his things, some clothes, photographs of his family, and drawings from his grandchildren. I called Linda and told her it was all over. Bob was dead. She cried, and I went home. The next day, I met with Carol and her 3 children. Of course, they are no longer children. I expressed my condolences to them and explained why I had not told them anything about their father's illness. At the meeting with Carol, her friend Dawn was there for support. Carol spoke. "Tom, forgive me for screaming yesterday. You were Bob's good friend, and you didn't deserve this." "Thank you, Carol, I understand. We all sometimes say and do things that we later regret." She just looked at me. "Bob was a strong man. He loved each of you. In October, he learned that he had cancer. He needed someone who could take him to the doctor. He also appointed me as executor of his will. He didn't tell anyone because there was nothing he could do except feel sorry for him. And he didn't want pity. He always said, 'You will find out everything in due time.' He made sure to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with you. He wanted to share these holidays with you." My words brought tears to everyone's eyes. Your father has settled all his affairs. He didn't want you to have to deal with his funeral or deal with his estate. That's why I'm here. He has made a new will, and I will carry out his will. There are a few things he wanted to leave with each of you. Kelly, he said that you always loved the piano, so he bequeathed it to you. Kyle, his truck is yours. Kim, you have always been a movie buff and loved watching movies with him. He left you his entire collection of DVDs and videotapes. Oh, and one more thing, he bequeathed films for adults to me. This made Kim smile. Tom, what about the house and everything else? Kelly asked. He ordered the house to be sold. It was valued at $230,000, but due to the real estate market, it will most likely be around $175,000. However, if one of the family members wants to buy it, he said that the house could be purchased for $150,000. As for the rest of the things, Carol can check and take whatever she needs. Everything else will be sold at auction. The money will be divided as follows. After all sales and funds are received, Carol will receive 50%. His 3 children will receive 10% each. 5 grandchildren will each have 2% saved for the future. Their parents will manage their accounts. 10% left. This money will remain with me so that I can pay all his debts. Whatever remains after this, I will receive for fulfilling the duties of executor. I assure you this is a very fair distribution for everyone. Does anyone have any questions? I asked. What about the funeral and where will he be buried? Asked Kim. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned that first. Funeral services will be at Miller Funeral Home in 3 days. In the evening, there will be a farewell, and the next morning a funeral ceremony. He wanted to leave a few days in case someone wanted to come from afar. He will be buried in Mount Olive Cemetery. Carol, he mentioned that you have neighboring properties. You can either keep yours or sell it. Carol began to cry again. Funeral and burial expenses have already been paid. He even saved money for lunch after the funeral for all the guests. I will need to contact Roger's restaurant to make a banquet room reservation. Bob provided for this too. If one of Bob's relatives wants to stay at his house to attend the funeral, it is possible. He also mentioned that he spent a lot of time packing his clothes to donate them to the Salvation Army. He planned everything. I am only carrying out his will. He was my best friend, and I loved the man. The funeral went exactly as planned. I couldn't believe how many people came. I saw and spoke with many of his relatives whom we had previously visited. There were both men and women whom I did not know. Linda talked to them, and it turned out that they were his friends from trips and tours. I watched some women and couldn't help but wonder which of them he might have been intimate with. I stood at the casket, greeting his family and friends. I was surprised that Carol and the children were standing nearby, greeting people with me. It was impossible to say that she and Bob were divorced. She communicated so cordially with the guests. Bob would be proud of them. After the funeral, almost everyone gathered at the restaurant, where a buffet was served in the banquet hall. Many people stuck around to talk about what a good man Bob was. Kelly approached me and asked if she and her husband Ted could buy a house. She said it was the house where she grew up, and she had so many fond memories of it. I replied that I would inform her mother, brother, and sister about this. She was the first and only one to show interest. The price was $150,000. The new refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, and trash compactor remained in the house. There was no need to transport the piano. It also remained in the house. I told her that if she wanted anything else, she would have to discuss it with her mother. Apart from the curtains, everything else was put up for auction, since her mother and siblings were to receive a share. Kelly understood this. A few days later, I contacted the bank and Kelly and Ted's mortgage application was approved. They could begin moving immediately after the auction, which was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Many people returned from the funeral to the auction. I think everyone knew that Carol and Bob only bought quality items. Even their children bought something that reminded them of their childhood. Everything was sold. I hired a cleaning company to wash the walls and clean the carpets. The house looked brand new when I handed the keys over to Kelly and Ted. Kelly cried when she entered the house where she spent her childhood. My work was completed, all that was left was to divide the money. I sat in my office, checking balances and calculating how much money each heir would receive. Between the remaining funds from his pension and savings, Bob had accumulated nearly $300,000. As I sat at the table, my wife Linda came into the office and sat in the chair opposite me. "Are you glad it's finally over?" she asked. "Yes, I am very glad that he simplified everything for me. Almost everything was arranged in advance," I replied. "Did you ever tell him that you slept with Carol?" she suddenly asked sharply. "Linda, we've already discussed this over and over again." "No, I didn't tell him. Why did I have to hurt him? It was a mistake, and you know it. Looks like I'll be paying for this for the rest of my life." Here's how it happened. During their separation, before the divorce was formalized, I went to Carol to talk to her. Her sister went to visit her son for a couple of days. When I arrived, Carol was drunk or close to it. She invited me in. She cried, and I hugged her to comfort her. We always flirted a little, as did Linda and Bob, but it never went any further. We were best friends. I truly wanted to reassure Carol. She had apparently just gotten out of the shower and was wearing only a robe. While we were hugging, it swung open. Everything started to spin, and I started touching her breasts and kissing her. Soon I laid her on the sofa and started having sex with her. She started crying, and I kept apologizing, but she asked me to leave. I kept saying how sorry I was. This was my best friend's wife, and we had an unspoken agreement that we would not pursue each other's wives. I later learned that Bob had not been with another woman in almost 20 years. I felt like I had betrayed my best friend, even though they were getting divorced. When I returned home, it got even worse. Carol felt so guilty that she called Linda to apologize to her for her actions. When I entered the house, Linda gave me a dressing down. She was crying and trying to slap me at the same time. I tried my best to explain that it was a mistake and that I was truly sorry. I apologized over and over again. I didn't know what else to say. Finally, I asked if she wanted me to leave. "No, I love you, Tom, but you cheated on me with one of my best friends, and the worst thing is that it was Bob's wife." Carol felt so bad that she was afraid of losing me as a friend. I realized she was drinking, so I think you took advantage of the situation. "You're a real bastard, Tom." "So what now?" I asked. "I would like to return everything, but I can't. We will remain married, but I will repay you in kind. Throughout our marriage, I have never cheated on you, and you know it. I will find a man and sleep with him once. I promise it will only be one time. I will never tell you who it was or when it happened. You'll just have to live with this thought or leave. The choice is yours." Here's how it all happened. Now Linda was still sitting nearby. "Did you know that at Bob's funeral I heard women talking about what kind of lover he was? Did you know about this?" I looked at Linda and remembered her words about revenge. "So you slept with Bob to get back at me. Let me tell you something about Bob that you might not know. After you slept with Carol, I was very angry and thought about going to Bob. I came to his house and offered myself to him. I said you cheated on me, but didn't mention Carol, and that I wanted revenge. Do you know what he said?" Bob responded, "Linda, if I could choose a woman to be intimate with other than Carol, it would be you. I haven't cheated on her for 20 years. I haven't had sex since we separated because I was hoping she would come back. I'm not going to cheat on her now while we're still married." He hugged me and said he loved me, but he wouldn't do that to her or you, Tom. That's the kind of person he was. I was silent for a while and then said, "I know that after the divorce he was with several women, but he didn't name anyone in particular. Usually he traveled to another city, but he also had girlfriends through local connections." Linda replied, "Do you know what Carol once told me? Bob gave her the best sex of her life, and it was because of this that she divorced him." Then she cried. "I'm not sure if he was with anyone else after he found out about the cancer. Can I ask you a question? Of course, you are my wife, and I love you. Did you really take revenge on me? I'd really like to know." Yes, Tom, I took revenge. It was shortly before the new year. I wanted to start the new year with a clean slate. I promise I will never see him again. This happened once. Nobody should know about this. My name is Carol Beale. I read a story that my late husband wrote and would like to make a few clarifications or at least express my opinion. First of all, I still consider him my husband and always will. I truly loved him, no matter what others thought. I was called a bitch, a girl of easy virtue, and many other words. Some wanted me to be shot, stabbed, hurt, or killed. It was stunning. There are a few facts that Bob left out or forgot to mention. I'm not here to damage his memory, but to explain why I acted the way I did. When I first met Bob, I fell head over heels in love with him. I worked for his sister, and she told me that he liked me. I decided to take my time and wait a little before agreeing to a date. About a month later, we started dating. We went on at least 4 dates before we made love. I was a virgin when I met Bob. I remember asking him to be gentle because I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. He was a good lover. I know I was accused of cheating on Bob. I want to officially state I never cheated on him. I had many opportunities for this, but I did not seek this type of revenge. At the end of Bob's story, Tom wrote that I slept with him. This is true, but I will explain later why this happened. Our early years with Bob were wonderful. We made love almost every night. It didn't even bother him if I had my period. We were young lovers and tried different positions. Even after our 3 children were born, we still made love at least twice a week. I wasn't always in the mood, but I often did it for Bob. It pains me to say this, but I have to. Bob cheated on me more times than he mentioned in his story. Maybe he forgot about some of them or didn't want to look bad. After reading his story, I wasn't interested in what he did after our divorce, but I was hurt to learn that he slept with my friend Jen. If I had known he did more than just kiss her, I would have killed them both. We had a gun in the closet at home. I am a small woman, usually happy, but I can easily lose my temper. I think it's because of my upbringing in a family with 9 brothers and sisters. When I'm angry, I'm not afraid of anyone. Luckily, Jen moved away years ago. I have a tendency to hold long grudges, as you might have guessed. Before delving into his infidelities, I want to talk about the good times in our lives. Our children were everything to us. We attended all of their school and sporting events. They were wonderful children, and now they have become reasonable parents. We did everything we could for them, and I devoted a lot of time to teaching them the difference between good and evil. Bob mentioned that he heard me tell the girls that I had been molested once. It was with my friends, and a man approached us. The man touched us inappropriately and then exposed himself to us. We ran away, and I told my mother about it, who called the police. The man was arrested and sent to prison. I told Bob about this dozens of times. The problem is that it left a mark on me. Many men may not understand this, but I am sure women will understand. This is something that cannot be forgotten, no matter how much you want to. This partly explains why I had a hard time touching Bob, even though I did it more than once. I just couldn't please him. It hurt me because he always did this for me, and I liked it. Bob also mentioned that I didn't want to travel with him. This is not entirely true. He may have thought so, but what he really wanted was to buy a camper van when he retired and travel all over the country while living in it. I didn't want to leave my children and grandchildren to live in a camper. We traveled a lot while the children were growing up. Every year we went on vacation as a family. We traveled to Ohio and many other states, including Kentucky, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Indiana. We've taken the kids to Kings Island a dozen times and to Cedar Point more than once. We flew to Disney World and had a great time. We visited many other places. They are simply too many to list. After the kids were grown, we took a cruise with friends. I thought it would be more fun with friends. Bob wanted to go to Dollywood and Tennessee, so we did it. I just wanted him to understand that camping is not my thing, especially starting in my 60s. I loved day trips to see shows, performances, and attractions. Bob knew this, but he made me out to be the villain. When my sister Dawn and I met him on an excursion after our divorce, he accused me of not wanting to be with him, but happy to travel with others. We approached him to let him know that he could join our day trips, but he basically told us to go to hell. I can't tell you how much this hurt me. Perhaps it's time to talk about the unpleasant part of our marriage. As I mentioned, I didn't know that Bob cheated on me with Jen. If I had known, everything would have ended already then. Jen told me there was nothing between them, and I believed her because Bob said the same thing. After he started working in the insurance business, everything began to change. He often worked late into the night. He spent less time with the children, and it became like a single-parent family. Don't get me wrong. Bob did an excellent job of supporting the family financially, but was often absent during family events. He claimed that I liked the things he bought for us, and this is true, but this is not the whole truth. We argued like most spouses. We both worked, but when there was dinner to cook or laundry to do, it always fell to me. The kids helped me, but Bob came home and sat in front of the TV while I did the housework. We fought constantly because I wanted him to help me. I wasn't a maid, a cook, or anything else he wanted me to be. He always answered that he was a breadwinner who worked hard all day and deserved peace and quiet at home. I snapped and told him to go to hell. From that moment on, I decided that dinner would be ready for the whole family, and if he wanted to join, he was welcome. But we weren't going to put off dinner every night because of him anymore. I also stated that he could do his own damn laundry. I'm tired of being his maid. I also worked hard every day. This went on for quite some time. We had good days and not so good days. Until one evening my friend Marcia came by and said she saw Bob in the next town over, having dinner with some woman. I was shocked, but quickly made an excuse by saying that it was probably a client, and they were discussing her insurance company over lunch. Marcia told me to be wary, adding that the woman looked very attractive. Of course, she laughed later. That evening I asked Bob about his day, and he said he had several business meetings. He didn't mention anything about the woman, saying only that he wasn't hungry because he stopped at McDonald's and grabbed a couple of sandwiches. I didn't know if I should start talking about that woman and the dinner. I began to not trust him, and this was unbearable for me. We already had enough problems, and now I still doubted his loyalty. One night, I checked his wallet and found a condom. That really pissed me off because he had a vasectomy. When I asked him about it, he said he was cleaning out our son's old room in the basement and found it on the floor. According to him, he simply put the condom in his wallet without really thinking about it. I didn't say anything more, but now I was watching him closely. That's when I saw him with a young woman. This was the third time in a week that he had gone to the same house. The last time he went there was immediately after the phone call. I waited for him outside for more than half an hour. He didn't even take his briefcase with him. When he returned home an hour later, I saw everything in his face. He cheated on me. I tried to control myself, although inside I wanted to kill him. He admitted that it was an isolated incident and said that he was very sorry. He asked if I wanted him to leave, which of course would mean the start of a divorce. I loved him, but at the same time I hated him for what he did to our marriage. Looking back, I probably could have kicked him out and gotten a divorce, but I still loved him. I wanted to take revenge, but I understood that I could not cheat on him. So I told him he could stay, but I wouldn't sleep in the same room with him anymore. If he wants, he can leave. The decision was his. He decided to stay. Yes, I deprived him of sex. This was my revenge. We still did family things together, attended parties and events. No one, as far as I know, suspected our problems. To everyone around us, we were the perfect couple, but inside I was suffering. Sometimes I go out with my friends once every few months. We went to restaurants, bingo, or bachelorette parties and shopping. Sometimes we went to the bar to have a drink. Sometimes we were invited to dance. Yes, I danced with other men, but if they started to behave inappropriately, I demanded that they stop. If they didn't listen, I didn't hesitate to make a scene. My friends will confirm this. One man didn't stop and put his hand on my butt again. I grabbed the fork and stabbed him in the hand. There was a lot of noise, and he was asked to leave. After that, any man who danced with me knew that no meant no. That doesn't mean they didn't try to touch me, but when I said stop, they stopped. Although I admit, sometimes I let their hands linger a little longer than they should have, but none of them ever went further. Of course, after I had a drink and returned home, Bob tried to initiate sex. I always agreed, mainly because I still wanted him. I let him think it was the alcohol that was pushing me to do this, but in reality, it was my way of staying close to him. This went on for years. For the most part, our lives were going pretty well, or at least that's what I thought. We only made love once every few months, but those were good times. When I went through menopause, I knew I was becoming unbearable. I think a lot of women and their men go through this. I was too irritable and snapped at Bob. Later, I had to undergo several major surgeries, and Bob was always there for me. He supported me during these difficult times and also after the death of our parents. I wanted to forgive him for cheating, but it was hard. I had a couple of cosmetic surgeries to make myself look better. Bob didn't approve, but he supported me. It really helped me feel more confident. I knew I was getting older and becoming less attractive. We went on a little trip with some friends, and that night I initiated intimacy with Bob. I even tried to please him, but I couldn't. I wanted Bob to know that I loved him. After that, we started having sex a little more often, about once a month. I tried, but at times I had images of Bob with other women. I couldn't control it. When our first grandchild was born, I told Bob that I wanted to quit my job and stay home and take care of my granddaughter. He said we are financially secure and he doesn't mind. I loved taking care of my grandchildren. It was almost like becoming a mother all over again. I later developed serious health problems and had to have a partial hysterectomy. It was when our sex life began to improve that this blow occurred. It was 6 months before I could have sex again. One day Bob came into my room and started fondling me. I really wanted this because so much time had passed. Bob stopped and said I needed to see a doctor. I already had a checkup scheduled in a few months and decided to wait. Bob was unhappy with this and went to his room. Life went on until one day I saw Bob's car behind our neighbor's house. It was Cindy, one of the divorced women from our church. This was the woman Bob claimed to have slept with after our divorce. But I think differently. I saw his car at her house before. I didn't say anything. It was all over for me. All that remained was to wait for the right time to get a divorce. I was already quite old and wanted to prepare for life without him. I only told my sister about everything, and we began planning for me to move in with her. I went to the doctor, who said that I was now completely healthy and there should be no more problems. But I had no intention of having sex with Bob again. Then the day came when Bob called me to the pool deck. We started arguing, and I was yelling at him, trying to get my feelings across. Bob did not react at all. His persistence and ignorance infuriated me. I felt fear and resentment, but at the same time something else rose up in me that I could not explain. My emotions were at their limit. It seemed to me that I couldn't stand it anymore. I ran into the shower, trying to wash away all the unpleasant experiences. My thoughts were racing between the decision to end our relationship and the intense feelings I still had for him. I cried when I got out of the shower and decided to go to my sister to sort myself out. I packed my suitcase and told Bob that I needed time to be alone and think about everything that was happening. A couple of days later, I talked to Bob about divorce. I told him I knew about Cindy and I couldn't go through that again. I showed him the fair divorce agreement and told him that I had already talked to our children. I hated doing it, but I had to do something. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, leaving Bob. I will love him until the day I die. I just couldn't take it anymore. During our 3-month separation, he constantly asked me to come back. I told him I couldn't. I just couldn't live like this anymore. My sister went to visit her son, and I decided to drown out my grief. I got drunk and took a shower. I was sitting in the living room when the doorbell rang. It was Tom, who was both our friend and Bob's best friend. He said he thought he'd come by and see how I was doing. One thing led to another, and I told him how much I missed Bob and started crying. He hugged me and hugged me. All I could think about when I was drunk was my husband, and before I knew it, I was having sex with Tom on the couch. When I came to my senses, it was already too late. He was the only man I ever had sex with besides my husband. I asked him to get away from me, which he did. He apologized over and over again for how sorry he was. I asked him to leave. I was confused and called his wife Linda and apologized to her for what happened between me and Tom. She was my best friend, and I didn't want to lose her. I've already lost Bob. I saw Bob at my grandchildren's events, and he always came to their birthday parties. We invited him to every family event, and he usually came, but he never stayed long. This was before Thanksgiving. He stayed there longer than usual and looked like he had lost a lot of weight. He got angry at me for interrogating him and said that I always said that he needed to lose weight, but that was not true. I got worried and called his doctor, but they said they couldn't give me any information because I was no longer his wife. I asked Tom several times about various things, such as the fact that he was going on a trip to Michigan and Kentucky with Bob. I remembered that this is what Bob did to his father before he died. This is how he said goodbye. I was very worried about Bob. He showed up at Kim's for Christmas and bought everyone gift certificates, even me. I watched him all day. He even played with his grandchildren. I knew something was wrong, but he didn't want to talk to me. He called all the children and even me to wish us a happy new year. I also wished him the same and told him that I loved him. 2 days later, Linda called me and told me that Bob was dying and was in University Hospital. I called Tom on his cell phone and said I wanted to talk to Bob. I screamed at Tom and wasn't going to give up until I talked to Bob. Tom told me that he was dying and had already performed his last rites. He put the phone to Bob's ear, and I told him I loved him and always had. I miss him so much. The next thing I heard was Tom telling me that Bob had died. I sat down and cried. I couldn't stop. The only man I've ever loved has just left me forever. I'll never see him again. Tom came in the next day and told me and the kids the whole story about Bob having cancer and didn't want to worry any of us about it. He was appointed executor of Bob's estate, and he told us how it was all divided. I asked Tom why he even left me anything. He told me that Bob still loved me and wanted the rest of my life to be comfortable. He also knew that when I died, I would give everything to our children and grandchildren. I was his wife at the funeral. I didn't care what anyone thought. They could talk about me behind my back as much as they wanted. He was my husband for 42 years, sometimes very good, sometimes not so good. I may not be the nicest old lady in town, but that's who I am. If we had to do it all over again, I would marry him in a heartbeat. I hope he wouldn't cheat on me and everything would be much better. I guess I always wanted him to be next to me. I felt safe with him. Perhaps I should have divorced him as soon as I heard about his cheating. Please don't throw it all in my lap. He could leave any time he wanted. Like me, we tried to succeed. If I had to leave any words of wisdom, it would be, don't cheat on your spouse. If you do that, you're on a very difficult path. Bob, if you can read this, I hope to be with you again one day. Screw the naysayers. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.